Senor Maria didn't talk much about some certain things. For one, she didn't talk much about her father. I got to learn he was late, very randomly, one afternoon while we were washing clothes. You are always so quiet about your family, Senor Maria, I had said, scrubbing at my uniform. What is there to say? She replied nonchalantly, wringing water out of her blouse. My father is late. My mother, well, she's not in the picture. I paused mid-scrub. Your mother? She left, she said simply, shrugging as though she was discussing someone else's life. Way before my father died. It was just me and my sister after that. She didn't offer more, and I didn't push. Over time, I picked up bits and pieces. Senor Maria and her younger sister had been taken in by a church member, someone kind enough to adopt them and move them to Benin Republic. They had grown up there before returning to Nigeria just as Senor Maria was about to begin secondary school. But she never dwelled on the details, just like she never answered the question that burned in my mind every time we moved around freely, even at odd hours. How did she have extra keys to the hostel? Each time I asked, she'd chuckle, flashing that knowing smile. It's one of those things, she'd say, waving the question off. Standing by the gutter now, holding the pebble-like objects from the waist beads I'd found. It was hard not to connect the dots. Senor Maria's mysterious keys, her free access to places others couldn't go, the way she always seemed to have money to spare for her bloke activities. It all pointed in one direction. Could she really be behind the theft? But something didn't quite add up. If she was the thief, did she act alone? It seemed almost impossible to pull off something this big without help. And then there was the other question gnawing at me. Why had she been drunk earlier when we... I shook my head, refusing to let my thoughts wander there. Instead, I tucked the waist beads into my pocket and stepped away from the back of the hostel. The front of the dormitory was in chaos. Girls were screaming, shouting curses into the air, as though their words would bring divine justice. It shall never be well with the person that did this, one girl wailed, her voice breaking with anger. You will never have children in your life. Another shrieked, her fists shaking at the heavens. I scanned the crowd, my eyes searching for Senor Maria. She was sitting with Yvonne on a pavement nearby, looking unusually tense. Her gaze wandered, and then her eyes locked with mine. I quickly looked away, but it was too late. Senor Maria stood abruptly, leaving Yvonne behind. She walked off, heading toward the back of the toilet block near Yellow Hostel. I hesitated for a moment before quietly following her. She stood there with her arms folded, her back to me, a picture of defiance and vulnerability. I know what you did, I said, my voice low as I stepped closer. She spun around, startled, her face pale. Ruth, she whispered, her voice shaky. You startled me. I wonder how startled you'll be when I tell them who their first suspect should be, I said, crossing my arms, my tone sharp. She shook her head, feigning confusion. I don't understand what you mean. Where did you go when the social night began? I didn't see you at all. Then you come back reeking of alcohol. And now, this. I pulled out the waist beads from my pocket and held them up. I found this inside the gutter. Her face flushed, and she covered her mouth with trembling hands. It really isn't what it looks like, Ruth, she said, her voice breaking. Then tell me the truth. I snapped, my frustration bubbling over. Those girls are in pain, and you know something about it. They are laying curses on you. She almost smiled, a bitter, fleeting expression. I don't believe in curses, she muttered. Then, sighing, she added, but it really isn't what it looks like. Yes, I know the thieves. And yes, I tried to stop them. In fact, someone else came in while it was happening, and we panicked and left. We hid the stolen things behind this toilet. But when we came back, the items were gone. Someone else must have taken them. I laughed dryly. That doesn't make any sense, Maria. So, who are the real thieves? She paused, her eyes darting around as though weighing her options. Finally, she sighed, rubbing her temples. Honestly, today has been too much. I'll tell you, but you must promise me you won't say a word to anyone. Promise. I nodded, my curiosity overpowering my skepticism. I'll admit, Ruth, I'm not a good person. I've done terrible things, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, we heard footsteps approaching. Senor Maria tensed, her words dying on her lips as we waited for whoever it was to finish their business and leave. Senor Maria continued, when I came to Orange Girls in Just One, the bullying was a lot, Ruth. You have absolutely no idea. So, to Rebel, Peace and I, well, it started out as a joke, formed our little community of juniors to get back at the seniors. I blinked, utterly stunned. Senior Peace? That wicked lady was a rebel. Senior Maria nodded with a rueful smile. It wasn't what you think. We formed the group to help each other out. If a senior was mean to you, we'd made plans to take her things. Stealing, yes, but it felt like justice at the time. It started small, then more girls wanted to join us for protection. But you said it was a joke. It was, Senor Maria said, almost wistfully. At first, it was just about solidarity, but it spiraled out of control, Ruth. We started selling off the mean seniors' belongings, splitting the money. It gave us a sense of justice, but it also gave us power. The girls began using the money for all sorts of things. Some, like me, did bloke. Some spent it on flashy clothes or food, and others used it to cover basic needs. She paused, rubbing her temples. By the time we got to SS3, we'd become the seniors we hated. And peace, oh, peace. Maria paused, shaking her head. What about her? I asked, almost breathless from the tension. She insisted that now we were seniors, we had a duty to take things from others, not to rebel anymore, but to help the group. She believed we owed it to our members. That's ridiculous, I blurted. How could she think that made sense? I told her the same thing, Senor Maria replied, her voice lowering. I spoke against it, Ruth, vehemently, but Peace wouldn't listen. Then Yvonne came into the picture, and everything got worse. Yvonne? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Peace liked her, Maria said, her voice dropping conspiratorially. Her lesbianism is real. And ours is what? Fake? I interrupted, my voice rising. What we did behind the building a few hours ago makes us what? The words left my lips like venom, the weight of them settling uncomfortably in the space between us. Senor Maria held my gaze. What if I told you my feelings for you were real? She said softly. Her eyes locked onto mine, just as they had when we held each other at the peak of our moment. The rapid breathing and muffled sighs replaying in my head and making me feel warm. When I saw you, Ruth, and asked you to be my babe, I didn't think about it like that. You make me feel things, real things, not just physical. My chest tightened as her hand brushed against mine. Maria, stop, I began, but my voice faltered. Listen, she interrupted, her tone insistent. Maybe I am a lesbian, maybe I'm not. But what I feel for you isn't just some game, Ruth. It's real. I pulled my hand away, shaking my head. No, Maria, you were drunk earlier. You reeked of alcohol when we crossed the line. Why were you drunk? Maria paced for a moment, avoiding my gaze. You won't believe me if I told you. Try me. She stopped, exhaling deeply. I thought you were having an affair with Peace, she said bitterly. You two came back from outside during Mr. Simon's service of songs, looking all disheveled, remember? I couldn't handle it, so Yvonne and I sneaked out this evening to get drinks. That's when she told me she had feelings for me. What? I asked, stunned. Maria laughed bitterly. She did, but it's complicated, Ruth. Yvonne reminds me of my childhood. She's been through so much, and when I noticed Peace had an eye for her, I tried to protect her. I asked Yvonne to be my babe first, to keep her safe from Peace. I frowned. But then Peace went and told her about our group, our little operation. She promised Yvonne we could help her gather money for her sister's heart surgery. Her sister is sick? I asked, my voice dropping with concern. Maria nodded grimly. When Yvonne told me, I laughed it off at first. But then I thought, why not? Why not start with stealing from Peace? I mean, by all standards, she's the meanest of us all, right? So, yes, we stole from her, made some money. I gave it to Yvonne and told her not to be greedy, that we could still solicit funds from other people. She agreed. But tonight, after she told me her feelings and I told her I was in love with you instead, Maria paused, a wry smile spreading across her lips. When I told her I wasn't interested in her romantically, she blackmailed me. She said if we didn't steal tonight to make up for the surgery costs, she'd out me. What? I exclaimed. Yes, Ruth. Apparently, juniors have bargaining power too. The men at the gate helped us break boxes, as usual. They always get their cut. Yvonne packed the stolen items into an empty trash bag. Maria smirked, but I told her your things must remain intact. I felt my stomach twist. And then Maria shrugged. We were about to leave when we heard someone coming. The person had a key, so she must be a senior. We panicked and we all ran, crawling through the gutter to escape. Yvonne quickly hid the bag behind the toilet. Afterward, we joined the social night. Oh, I muttered. The piece is finally coming together. And why did you kiss Yvonne during the dance? Maria's lips curled into a sly smile. To get a rise out of you. It worked, didn't it? I shook my head. Disbelief edged across my face as I stared at her. Although students had gotten tired and retired to the hostels, most of them crying, we were woken up a few minutes past 1 a.m. to gather in front of the dormitory. This had never happened since I came to the school. Then again, I hadn't even stayed up to a year, yet it felt like ages. All blue block students, come out now, the matron's voice screamed, punctuated by the shrill clang of the bell. The dormitory erupted into sluggish chaos. Girls shuffled out in their wrappers, tied hastily around their waists, yawning and rubbing sleep from their eyes. A few muttered curses under their breaths, while others slapped mosquitoes feasting on their legs as we assembled in front of the building under the oppressive glare of the security floodlights. The crowd buzzed softly with confusion, but when the principal stepped forward, silence fell like a hammer. The school principal, at this hour, my stomach twisted. The only reason she'd leave her house at this ungodly time had to be serious. And I already knew exactly what it was about. My mind spun as dread flooded through me. So, what is this I am hearing from you ladies? The principal began, her voice sharp and commanding. Stealing from your own fellow students? Do you know how shameful this is? Her voice pierced through the cold night like a whip. She scanned the crowd, her stern gaze meeting every girl's face. My heart was racing and I could barely breathe. I left my house by this time because of you. This nonsense will not happen under my watch, she continued. God help me with the decision the school board will make if we don't get to the bottom of this. Now listen very carefully. She paused, letting the tension settle over us like a thick fog. If you are the one involved in this or know the person responsible, step forward now. The silence that followed was unbearable. My eyes darted nervously around, but no one moved. The principal exhaled sharply, clearly annoyed. Okay, since you all are proving stubborn, you have 3 days. 3 days for the perpetrators to come forward, or for one of you to provide reliable information that will lead us to them. If not, she let her words hang ominously. If not, she repeated, we will deboard all SS1 to SS3 students. Every single one of you. For those of you who've had relatives in this school, you know this is not an empty threat. We've done it before, and we can do it again. Only this time, we will make history by deboarding 3 sets at once. A ripple of murmur swept through the crowd, the gravity of her threat sinking in. Save yourselves, the principal said, her voice dropping with finality. If you have any information, come to my office during admin hours. No excuses. With that, she turned sharply on her heels and left, flanked by the matron and a few security men. The students erupted into murmurs the moment she was gone. 3 sets? Can she really do that? Someone whispered. She's done it before, another replied. I heard she deboarded an entire set years ago. We are finished if no one confesses. I stood rooted to the spot, my pulse thundering in my ears. I could feel my palms sweating despite the chilly night air. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, images of girls crying and packing their belongings haunting me. I was so consumed with anxiety that the faint glow of dawn came too quickly. The next day, I noticed something odd. Senor Maria was walking alone, no longer attached to Yvonne like she usually was. Instead, I saw Yvonne laughing with Senor Peace. What's going on? I waited for my chance, and when Senor Maria was far from the others, I caught up to her. I think you should tell the authorities what you know, I said in a low voice. Maria stopped in her tracks and turned to me, her face a mix of disbelief and anger. What? And get implicated? I understand, I said, trying to keep my tone calm. But people are going to get punished for this. Innocent people, Maria. Maria's expression hardened. You don't understand anything, Ruth. I opened the hostel doors. I negotiated with the gatemen to help us. If I go to the authorities, I'm finished. But nothing, she snapped, cutting me off. I can see you hate me, Ruth. I regret ever telling you anything. Her words stung, and I was about to reply when someone passed by us. A girl. She glanced at us briefly, her face unreadable, and then walked on. Maria's face turned pale. Isn't that the same girl who walked by yesterday when we were talking by the toilet? I froze, my heart plummeting. Oh no, I whispered. Maria's hand tightened on my wrist. What if she overheard us? Panic coursed through me, and I pulled away, quickening my pace to get away from Maria. I can't do this right now, I muttered, leaving her standing there. As the third day approached, the tension among the students became unbearable. No one smiled, no one laughed. Whispers and suspicious glances filled every corner of the dormitory. That night, a few minutes past 11 p.m., we were jolted awake again. The principal was back. We gathered under the dim floodlight, the shadows of the trees swaying ominously in the background. The principal's face was stern and her posture rigid. Good evening, ladies, she began, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Well, it is good to see we still have some good heads amongst you. Over the past few days, some of you have come forward with information. Based on what we now know, we have a list of names. My stomach churned. This was it. I clenched my fists, my thoughts racing. What if my name was there? What if Maria's name was there? I could already imagine the crushing disappointment on my mother's face, my father's silent fury, and my siblings' whispered questions. The principal pulled out a piece of paper, her expression unreadable. If you hear your name, step forward immediately. Let's not waste time. Yvonne Dogo. Gasp rippled through the crowd as Yvonne, her face pale, hesitated before stepping out. Peace, Samuel! My heart skipped a beat. Even peace? I thought. I glanced at her as she reluctantly shuffled forward, her head bowed. The principal continued to read more names, her voice firm. With each name, I braced myself, expecting to hear mine or Maria's. But when the list ended, neither of our names had been called. My knees nearly buckled in relief. I felt dizzy, like I might throw up. When the interrogation began, the school became a hotbed of gossip. By the following morning, the whole school knew what had happened. Someone had reported seeing Senor Peace dragging a suspicious trash bag toward the gatesmen's quarters late at night. They had also seen Yvonne and Senor Peace entering the small house by the gate shortly after the principal's visit 3 days prior. It was a vague report based more on suspicion than evidence. But under pressure, Yvonne had cracked. She spilled everything, pointing fingers at Senor Maria as the one who had given her the keys to the hostel. When Senor Peace was interrogated, she admitted to the hidden community and explained how it had begun between her and Maria back in JS1 as a way to cope with relentless bullying. When Senor Maria's name came up, my stomach flipped. The day she was called to the admin block, Maria looked utterly defeated. Her confidence, the air of superiority she always carried, had crumbled. I saw her pacing in front of her bunk that morning, her hands trembling. Senor Maria, are you okay? I asked, standing awkwardly near her. She paused, her eyes meeting mine. Do I look okay, Ruth? Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw tears welling up in her eyes. I hesitated, then reached for her hand. You'll be fine. Just tell them the truth. Maria scoffed bitterly. The truth? Ruth, truth doesn't matter here. They've already decided to use us as scapegoats. Before she left for the admin block, I squeezed her hand tightly. I'll be waiting for you. Earlier that week, I had moved to Yellow House to be closer to her. The girl who owned the bunk beside hers, Senior Pamela, the only SS3 student aside Senior Maria in the room, had decided to become a day student, leaving the space empty. It felt like fate. I packed my things from Purple House and settled into the new routine, praying every day that the matrons or the school authorities wouldn't notice my switch. With the daily attendance now being taken in the hostels, the risk of getting caught was high, but I couldn't leave her alone. I was so scared for Senor Maria. My depth of love for her increased even after finding out she used to steal. On one of those nights, I had watched her sleep. Her chest rose and fell steadily, her face peaceful despite the storm surrounding her. I thought about everything she'd endured. How could one person carry so much pain and still stand tall? God, I whispered into the darkness. I know you are probably tired of me, but please, just this once, help her. Sometimes at night, she'd invite me to her bed just to lie next to her. Of course, and we'd cover the bunk and the next bunk with a bed sheet, creating a curtain like she always did for privacy. We'd cuddle and sometimes share a kiss, but never had the courage to go beyond kissing again. Why? She'd ask, whispering into my ear, her voice filled with desire. I'd shake my head, not wanting to talk about it. Helen, who was in the same hostel room with us, had earlier told Esther, who told me that Helen heard Senor Maria and Yvonne shaking the bunk. It burned in my mind, thinking that the same bed we shared now, Senor Maria had been intimate on it with another lady. That afternoon, when Maria returned, she looked drained. She slumped onto her bed, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. I rushed over, sitting beside her. How did it go? I asked softly. Maria buried her face in her hands. My aunt will kill me if I get expelled. Her voice was barely a whisper, trembling with emotion. I quickly grabbed a bedsheet and tied it between the bunks to block out prying eyes. Come here, I said gently, pulling her into my lap. Her body shook as she cried, muffling her sobs against me. Don't cry here, please. The juniors will hear. Maria pulled herself together, wiping her eyes. But then she yelled, One Jew! As they all ran to her. Senor Maria did something very unique to boarding school senior cruelty, something I had only heard my siblings speak of. She sent each and every one of them on endless errands, what was called the journey of no return. I don't have time to go into details so as not to reveal every boarding school lesbian secret, but basically, it made the juniors disappear until whenever the person who sent them was satisfied. Finally, some peace, Senor Maria sighed, as the room had only us now. They are probably going to deport all of us. Our verdict will be announced tomorrow morning in front of the whole school during assembly. I placed a hand on her shoulder, sighing. I am so sorry about this, Senor Maria. Her eyes caught mine immediately, and she looked at me in that way again, the way that screamed, I need you. Without saying a word, she leaned in and kissed me. Please, allow me to love you, she whispered. I broke from the kiss. You're with Yvonne on this same bed, I blurted out. Signor Maria quickly shook her head. I have never been intimate with Yvonne. Helen said, Signor Maria interrupted me. Helen is Pisces' babe. She could have said anything. Oh, I thought to myself as Signor Maria lifted my chin up. I love you, Ruth, she said, pulling me into her arms as we let go of everything, the fear, the guilt, the pain. Our breaths and sighs filled the room, drowning out the world beyond the bedsheet curtain. As expected, Signor Maria, Signor Peace, Yvonne, and some other key participants discovered during the investigations were deported. The gatesmen who had helped break into boxes were relieved of their duties and handed over to the police. The school was shaken by the incident, and it did serve as a deterrent, but as expected of students, only for a while. Signor Maria had only about a month left in the school when she was deported, and we hardly got to meet during that period. I remember her last day at Orange Girls like it was yesterday. We hugged and cried. She told me she was going to return to Benin Republic. Having cell phones was really only for the privileged at that time, but she did give me her auntie's number and took my dad's. When are we ever going to see each other again? I asked, amid sobs. Don't cry, she said, patting my back. Life will surely bring us back together again. Someday and some way. Dear Diary, it has been 12 years since I left secondary school. And, well, I am a lesbian. In the closet, though. Haha.